maybe 2% of the year you saw a brown face, let alone a Māori. The only other person I knew with a Māori name growing up was my brother.
His latest big screen effort brings to life the story of celebrated war hero Sergeant Haane Manahi. Today's episode celebrates ANZAC. And with us on Let's Hui today is film director Tearepa Kahi. Tearepa Kahi te mākoe. No mai hoa. I first met you, and I don't know if you remember this, in Wellington.
Yep.
I think when you were under the tutelage of Jim Moriarty at Davis Street at Tamapōtaka's flat.
I do remember. Up at the back there.
At the back, yeah. But you were with Jim Moriarty.
Mr. Moriarty.
Legend.
Yeah.
Legend. What were you doing?
I was with his theatre company, Te
Oh, yeah.
Rāhua.
Yeah.
What were we doing? We were devising plays and putting on productions, performing to 2 different kura a day, bringing out something called social theatre, marae theatre. So I was at school and Jim came and performed at my school down in Canterbury.
Burnside.
And he burst through the school doors and hypnotized me.
Wow.
I was probably 15 years of age and wanted to be a basketball, a touch player, rugby player. And then he conjured something out of thin air. I was hypnotized. I can remember the tingles. I've got them now. And I had made a decision then at the end of his play that when I graduate from high school, I want to join him. This is what I want to do. So 18 years of age, I hitchhiked up to Wellington. Actually, they came down and picked me up. And I spent 2 years there. And we were putting on plays at marae, at high schools and prisons.
Wow.
So I had my 20th birthday in Paparoa Women's Prison. There were 14 lifers in New Zealand at that stage. And I think 11 of them sung me happy birthday for my 20th birthday. The play was fantastic. I learned so much about storycraft, but it was, you're not trying to be in the Berkeley theatre. You're spending time with real people and they're really opening up and you're trying to create something out of their lives, their lived experience.
Was the goal, though, to be an actor? That's what you wanted to do? Or was there always a kind of burning ambition to be behind the camera at some stage, to be a director, to be a producer, something like that?
Well, there were a number of fixed realities when we were both at school, weren't there? And one of them was there were 3 TV stations and maybe 2% of the year you saw a brown face, let alone a Māori. We rarely ever saw ourselves represented on screen. So it was something I'd never considered. But 2 years with Jim, he brought its own match fitness, stagecraft, storycraft. And after that, I lived with my nana in Pukekohe. Learned the reo from her. Travelled into Auckland Uni. Embarked on a BA in history, New Zealand history. But because I had a degree of match fitness and acting, I was still auditioning. Met my wife on the set of the Māori Merchant.
I'm going to get to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to that, yep.
So I was sort of hustling. There was a little bit of acting aspiration still there, but all the auditions were for the same Māori gang member. But there just weren't the parts. And what there wasn't was there were never our stories being represented, being created.
Yeah.
And if they were, they lived inside Pākehā institutions. So they were curated for a different audience altogether, never for us.
The Pukekohe connection, obviously, there's a bit of whakapapa connection in and around there, right? I mean, Ngāti Pāwa.
Yo.
That's you. That's the whānau.
That's me.
That's your
Ngāti Pāwa, Waikato.
Waikato. How important was that Pukekohe upbringing, for want of a better way of putting it? I mean, obviously it comes into play later on, and other directorial stylings, of course, and output. But how important was it to have that exposure to the Aotearoa, to understand more about identity, culture, and heritage, given the Christchurch upbringing?
The only other person I knew with a Māori name growing up was my brother. In saying that, we grew up together with a lot of other whānau Māori and whānau Pasifika down in Christchurch. It was awesome. Papa Nui, Aranui, we had our connections. And it was cool, but there was always a vacuum there, and I'd speak to Nana on the phone. I remember letting her know that I was learning te reo Māori at school. I think I answered the phone with, kia ora Nana, kei te pēhea koe. She goes, Pipitahi ana koe? I was like, I? Yeah, that shook me.
Yeah.
And the thing with my nana is she was tiny. She was a tiny, tiny person, but she had the biggest bite. She was funny. She shot from both hips. She could nail anything, and she had this incredible memory. She was the pōtiki of her whānau, so it had all been deposited into her. But I could never access it because kōrero. And not only that, I did see growing up that she is only herself when she's speaking in te reo. Hey. And I always had that personal aspiration to try and learn so I could make her laugh. And in order to make her laugh, you had to tell a joke and you had to nail the punchline and the timing. So it took me a while. It took me a while. But that was good. New dimension, new understandings, authenticity, understanding the inner workings of our Māori communities. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that all resonates when you're talking about directing. Film, understanding people, what makes them think. Getting behind the person to try and motivate.
You make it sound very calculated. But there was no pathway. There was no pathway. It was just basketball, touch, do the best at school, spend time with nana. Oh, there's something else here. How do we tell our Māori stories? How do we tell Māori stories in a tirohanga Māori? Ngākau Māori, how do we do that? So I was very lucky. I spent time with my nana, and I also spent time with another nana, Miratamita. She was brought on as an assessor for a series that I had written, and she sort of plucked me out, and we spent a lot, years together.
Wow. I will come back to Mirata. The bit you mentioned about meeting your wife on the Māori Merchant of Venice.
Yeah.
There's a bit of pain there for me because I auditioned and didn't make it. However, but like that was kind of bold from Don Selwyn. I mean, you mentioned Miratamita, but Don Selwyn's another one of those legends that...
He opened the doors. I was very lucky to spend time with him.
Yeah. See
his process, work through rehearsals. Fascinating. I think of Te Kauhoi, Whareoka, Sunny Kirikiri.
Te Rangiho Gilbert.
Te Rangiho. Scotty. And
Uncle Wasi.
Wasi was there. We had a rehearsal in Williamson. But something happened. Everybody, we read through the lines, and then everyone gave each other, this look. And then for the next, as we read the lines, everyone, ka mau tēnā ki tōna mita. Ka mau tēnā ki tōna mita. Kātahi, ka kawea te katoa o ngā whārangi o te puku o tēnei mea, o tēnei tuhinga, I te reo ake o rātou iwi. And we were all looking around going, man, we have cracked it. Never before has everyone spoken in their own dialect before.
Yeah.
Don was there and he was going, yeah, hoki ki te kupu, I tā ngā pei. So something was, we cracked something with this, bringing to life Pei's words with our own mita, but then at the end of the day, he made the executive decision that, no, we're not going to roll that way, we're just going to stick to what Pei had written, It was still good.
Yeah.
Light bulb moment for all of us in the room.
And of course, aside from obviously a sterling piece of work, meeting Rekura.
She was studying classical history at uni. I was studying New Zealand history. We just had our 20th year wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see you kept it close in the waka. Good on you. But your
father was asking me, hey, where's this boy from? Had to keep it quiet. From full marae up from your one.
But the other, of course, aho matua hard, reo hard, tikanga hard.
Well, she was just too meki back then.
Too meki and perform. That's right. Too meki perform pukana. That's right. Yeah. But that's a commitment, eh? It's a commitment between two people. It's not just about connection, obviously, and relationship. It's also about reo, and another storyteller.
Well, as Merata said, she is a stakeholder in the future of our country because she had so many tamariki. Toko whaa maua tamariki, tupu mai tahi rātou. Rātou katoa I te aho matua, I te reo Māori, ko te reo Waiu, ko te reo o Waikato, te reo o Tainui, And they're all little gangsters. So I've always got to stay busy because I'm always trying to put something in front of them that they can see, that they can move towards. That's our big, kaupapa between Reikura and myself. Yeah, the first short film I made was a dedication to, the birth of my son, Taua. So that was, how do we capture the Māori imagination amongst our youth if we can't tell our stories our way?
Taua was amazing. Not just the cinematography of it, but that story without, if wanting a better way of putting it, a story without speech and kōrero, which is a pretty bold and brave thing to do. How did you know it was going to work?
Well, this is an important thing with storytellers is you can't ask yourself that question.
See, that's the thing that I always think about.
Yeah.
Is like, how do I know this is going to work? And the fear cripples.
Yes.
What is it with you that doesn't allow that to occur?
What works? Will the story work, or does the kaupapa work? And if the kaupapa works, then the story works. Yeah. It's not removal or deflecting that a crippling anxiety can exist. It's just that you address and you calibrate your compass by a different true north.
But what does that mean?
You put the kaupapa first. So yes, a short film, 99.5% silent. But what is happening? Who is moving through the ngahere? Why? What are the questions, and how do you get the pictures to do the story? How do you get the cinematography? How do you get the sound design? How do you get location? How do you create tension with different characters, with different motivations? And how do you let that sort of propel the story forward?
How does something like Mount Zion work, knowing that you know that story really well? And how can you separate yourself out of that story, knowing the story as well as you do, to allow it to work?
Yep. You're getting me to channel my retrospective powers now. I just know that I felt incredibly comforted and directed by my whānau in Pukekohe, by my father. Mount Zion, if anything, is a love letter to Windmill Road. I hadn't seen that reflected in anybody else's vision.
Oh, I didn't know.
I haven't seen that on our screens before. The relationships between Kazis, the power of music. Do those things work? How can we give those important elements that give me the tingles, give my generation the tingles? How can we find the true form to carry that story forward? How can people who pick spuds from Te Ata Hāpara all the way through the day have an opportunity to pay homage to their hero Bob Marley? And suddenly all of these things sort of help to weave the form of the story together.
You see, from a personal perspective, my grandmother got on a train at Kawakawa and went to the market gardens in Pukekohe
Kia ora.
in the 50s, 60s, away from whānau. My dad got whāngaid out to an auntie and an uncle so she could go work at the market gardens. So when I saw it, I just started breaking down, because all of that comes back. And the thing that always comes up in my mind is, geez, how do you make this work so well? Because we always see ourselves in the mahi that you're doing. It's like you're able to easily build a connection with people that you don't even know have a connection to these stories, but you do it. Do you know how you do it?
I love that story. I can see Kawakawa very, very clearly. I can see the train station in Puki very clearly. So I can, I can see what you're speaking about. Carl Perkins, he hit me up while we were making Herbs. He goes, bro, how did you do my Mount Zion? That's my story.
Yeah.
That's my story.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, our stories remain, they're almost an undiscovered country to New Zealand. We live here, we are from here, we are of here, but we never see our stories woven together in a way that reflects our realities. So I'm not trying to make I'm not trying to prove to the world anything. I just want to be pono to 6 Windmill Road and the garage in which we sung those waiata and the fields up on the hill where all my uncles, all my aunties pick spuds. And it's just that. I want to be pono to that. So that's what I mean about the calibration of your, the story compass inside yourself is who are you in service of? How do you direct yourself? Whose reality are you bringing to screen? And if it's inside here and it is pono, then you have a chance at forging connections outside of Wimble Road.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, shout out to Wilcox Potatoes, by the way. Shout out to the wider whānau.
Yo.
You talked about music for Mount Zion. I don't know if you've noticed, but Stan's made some commentary on other podcasts about, well, the use of the version of the song that he said was only really a rehearsal, and then it became the version of that song, which he was kind of less than impressed with. But, I know as a singer, obviously, and a talented guy and all that kind of thing, but what do you make of the way people are still talking about Mount Zion now?
I'm socially media illiterate. So my specialty is pencil and paper and a cell phone. I don't have any accounts. I'm pretty in the whānau. I keep it pretty close and real. If someone tells me that something's going on, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I can radar detect something. In terms of the music, I just wanted to get it right for 1979, that version of it. There were other forms of reggae, and where people go with it is cool. Let it fly. Let it reflect other people's whānau spirit today. That's cool. I just wanted to pay homage to something that was real, that I remember. So I was being faithful to a memory. In terms of Mount Zion, and I've actually tried to keep it quiet because there was a lot of interference with the making of that film. So I don't receive interference now when I step up to the plate and tell a story. But because it was my first film, there was an institution that were presiding over every artistic decision that I could make. It was an incredible experience.
Have you made a conscious decision then on every bit of work after that to find yourself in a position where you won't allow that to occur? And if so, how does that work out when you're dealing with stories like Poye, the story of our song, whereas a deeply personal story for the prime whānau and Pātea and the people of Taranaki?
The first part of that question is interesting. All you can do to really bring the full potential of a story to full realization is with clarity. And sometimes being at your clearest means you surrender to the biggest mystery where you don't have the answers for what I need to tell today. But if you trust in the process, stay pono to the kaupapa, you put yourself in a place of discovery where you can make the discovery and find out how to tell the story. How do I tell Dalvanius' story in a way that is pono to him and not to my idea of him? Well, it turns out that after 9 months of editing the film one way, you get out of the way. You actually hand the steering wheel back to Dalvanius and he tells the story.
How do you do that with a story like Sergeant Haane Manahi? Because not here, beloved, respected, warrior, soldier, decorated, revered. Yes, there are descendants. Yes, there are whānau who are aware of that story and know him and protect that story, but not with you in the room, and you're, in essence, retelling the story.
Yeah. You say no. I'm not worthy. I can't
Did
tell
you
the
say
story.
no?
The way that you put it, I said no to that. I said no.
What did you say yes to then?
I said yes to Whaidana and her son Anaru. Yeah. Reikura and I, third cup of tea, we said yes to that. They have a very incredible connection. So I knew that I could be pono to them in terms of the weight that you describe, the universe, the decorations. Plus, there's another factor there, and it was there's a known world to Haane. We know the story. There have been documentaries on him. There have been publications on him. There have been an incredible amount of military records that I ingested that are written with great detail. And I couldn't be pono to all of that. but I could to Whaidona and Anaru. And in taking up that challenge and choosing to be pono to them, we managed to move away from the known world into this important factor for any film, and that is the unknown world. The more you can tussle with questions, the more you can steer away from what everybody already knows, the better, the stronger, because then you're on a ride of discovery. So what does that look like with his story? Well, we know that on the 19th of April, he went up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that he went up with cousins, and 5 to midnight they went up. They went up exactly where his cousin had told them to go. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Bennett, as you know, he was fulfilling a huge function there. He had said, no, this is our fight. ABCD company, we're in. We're taking this. We are going all the way in through to Unfittable Road. Leave it to us. We've got the best artillery. They launched out, but 45 minutes later, minefield, 11 officers down. What does Sergeant Haane do? And in terms of Lance Sergeant Haane Manahi, his name has become synonymous with the downgrade and controversy. Why wasn't he awarded the Victoria's Cross when 3 generals and field marshals said, this is the guy? No one has ever achieved what he has done, not in the entire Allied army. Because of the size of the controversy, I actually thought, well, how do we tell this story? Is it Anatomy of a Downgrade? Is it an Errol Morris doco? Am I creating a labyrinth by which we, Yellow Brick Road, breadcrumb trail, figure out the figure behind the door that said no, downgrade, and didn't sign his name? Or are we all caught looking at the story from the wrong end of the stick? Is this not about downgrade? How can we eclipse downgrade? Oh, what did he actually do? And who did he do it with? And so I concentrated. After a while, I went in that direction. And that was, I thought, much more faithful to Whaidona and Anaru. And in the discovery of that side of the story, we were able to unearth, embalm memory from the mountain that had been keeping his story perfectly intact, waiting for the moment to share it after decades, after generations. So Sergeant Haane is a really impressive story because it had nothing to do with me or my part in it. I'm a passenger in this story. I just managed to push the red button and assemble great troops. But in terms of the memory that actually sprung forth, the story whose time had come, they had decided, Takuruna, this family who is still living up on Takuruna, their memory had decided to tell the story. And the Manahi side of the story down in Ohinemutu, and the Morrisons, and all of this incredible B Company troop descendants who had kept his memory intact. They had decided to tell the story. So that's what we bring to the people now, is memory.
I'm interested when you say that you're just a passenger, because most passengers don't find themselves in a position where serendipity presents itself, and the Takuruna side of the whānau, for want of a better way of putting it, the Takuruna side presents itself and tells their story about Sergeant Haane. Mānahi Manahi.
Manahi.
I mean, how does that happen?
Oh, man. We had made a decision. They could have said it would be a good idea. I thought it was a good idea. She improves all my good ideas. To get over there, take some photos for our incredible art department. So there was a little bit of, Syria had turned into a hotspot. There were some question marks on being able to enter. We're not allowed to take cameras or drones inside. Managed to meet somebody who ended up being an incredible part of this serendipity destiny. Medi, who looked after myself and another good bro of ours, Richard Curtis. The reason I chose Richard Curtis is because he was there in 2006 with many Mōrehu of the Māori Battalion. I knew I'd lose no time with him. We had a very short window, given the hotspot element. So we landed, hit the ground running, but we landed in Ramadan. And Ramadan meant that there was no eating for anybody during daylight. So the person that I was looking after me, my host, Mehdi, he said, "Hey, Tearepa, I'm just going to go to Takruna and see if I can find a family." I was like, when in Rome, bro, we're happy not to eat as long as we get a, big bowl of porridge before sun up.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. And he goes, no, I'd love to sort it out because then you can call out to the whānau that can cook for you. I said, hey, we'd love that. Please go. Full blessings. He went up there, he found someone and he goes, I found someone who can cook for you. I think you should talk to them. I was like, I dismissed it. I was like, wow, all the reports say it was uninhabited. He won't know anything. It's cool. Yeah. He'll know what everybody in that part of the country knows. It'll be very secondhand. It'll be very after the fact. He goes, no, maybe you should have a talk to him. I land. He goes, well, let's go meet him. I was like, wow, again, it was uninhabited. There were no locals up there on Takaruna. I meet him. He has a little bit of sparkle in his eye. I've been spending time with Whaidonna and her son. And one of the things that really resonated with the story of this is that what are the mechanisms within our marae that allow for the sun to never set on their memory? So after the third cup of tea, I was taken downstairs, run around with the kids, have a look around the marae. First kid I met, what's his name? What's his name, bro? His name's Haane.
Oh, Haane.
His name's Haane. So I met Ohinema too.
That's right.
Yeah. And little Howie Jr.'s boy's name, beautiful boy. His name's Haane. And I'm like, there's something here. Yeah. In terms of it's our whānau, it's our whakapapa. Our whānau keep whakapapa alive. Yeah. I go over to Takruna, I meet Niza, and there's his son, Yusuf. And they can't speak a word of English. They speak 3-4 languages. It's just me and Richard Curtis. And then in a very, very short space of time, he starts talking about someone his grandfather met by the name of Mannheim. And I'm like, no, this can't be. And then the story just gets more and more detailed. It's that type of detail that can only have come from first-hand experience. And it gets deeper, and not only does it get deeper, more specific and more detailed, it starts to move through the same time zone of Sergeant Haane Manahi. And these two things, they intersect. And before I know it, our little photo shoot turns into a full-blown documentary shoot. We managed to procure a couple of radio mics, put one on the father, put one on the son. It echoes and repeats everything that's happening in Ohinemutu between Howie, Haane, Whaidonna, Anaru. We see it, this intergenerational way of telling story and keeping story alive, which has nothing to do with me. But I happen to be lucky enough to have said yes to the whānau, and we happen to get a good camera, get some good lenses. And because I'd ingested all the reports, I can at least point the camera in the what I think is the right direction, but everything gets redirected by Niza, and he conjures up the full military field, every layer, pinnacle, ledge, village, minefield, this day, this at this time, this at this hour, this pathway. No, that's not a German machine gun post, that's an Italian machine gun post. Wow. The level of detail that his grandfather witnessed. Wow. And that's what fills up the story canvas. Oh, I was just lucky, bro. But I feel lucky that we can bring this story, this embalmed memory with this level of artistic integrity, expertise, and bring it to 5.1 Dolby Digital sound on a large canvas and present that to the whānau.
Yeah, you see, when you say, I'm just lucky, bro, but you keep getting lucky is the thing that I'm trying to emphasise here. Huirangi Waikereupuru had this great quote. He said, there are some that feel the manaakitanga of Tāwhiri Māori and others that get wet. And, luck seems to find its way with you when you're doing this stuff is what I'm trying to say.
It is a skill to jump off the map maybe and not be afraid to get lost.
Where does that come from?
Love. Love of telling stories. Love of getting lost. Love of sitting with the mystery just a little bit longer than anyone else. Love of not having the answer in the moment, but actually surrendering to the kaupapa. And then it may be having the luck to get the right people involved. Because you can't tell stories with the scope and scale without an incredible amount of people beside you.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason why, we've talked before, for instance, around muru. And again, an incredible amount of, luck's not the right word, but there are certain things that happened. The way in which that story was told. Telling Tame's story, the way in which that story was told. It takes incredible bravery to jump off the map.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's possibly very true, right? There is a courage and a responsibility required for telling our stories our way.
Yeah.
And actually, before all of that, you have to trust yourself that you have the right to say yes to whaidona, to feel that you have the right to say yes to papatame, Dalvenius, my nana. All of these things, they all play an important role because they actually decide how much of yourself you can give to the story as well.
What's it like when you get those calls? Even kairako. Kairako is amazing, bro, And is the immediate thing that comes to mind, oh, heck, here we go again? Or is it, what is the first reaction when you get a call? Because my first reaction to Dr. Donna Mariana is how high. What is your first reaction?
Am I the right person?
See, that's the difference.
Yeah, am I the right person? And then it's, do I understand this? Can I give my best to this? Can I do something with this story that has yet to be told? Can I bring the unknown out into the known world? This is my process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit before about merata. What a legacy, eh? And being and having the opportunity to just even engage, let alone learn. How does it manifest itself when you're doing this kind of work, like on Sergeant Haane?
Well, that's a great question, but what I see that she's really left is patience. And that's a tricky thing because, in the world that's been created here upon which stories rise, it happens very quickly in this way. How do we write the proposal? When do we send it in?
Deadline.
Say.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And actually to remove yourself from that race is really, really important because that's not serving anybody. That's serving bureaucracy. That's not serving story. And Merata's great wand was on patience and preparing yourself to understand the level and depth required for that story and for yourself to tell that story. And no one teaches us that way. So, that's part of the normal process for my whānau and I now.
Yeah, it's also incredibly proactive. And it's a decolonized approach.
Yes.
It's
a Merata special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing that I think about is going, when I'm watching, in the back of my mind, I think, I wonder how that process happened, And so, for example, when you're doing some of the recreations, dramatizations of Sergeant Haane, war, takuruna, nighttime shoots, bullets flying, all those kinds of things.
I match fit, and I have a great team, and the team excels in the window that we have.
What does match fit mean?
It means that my happy place is actually a blank piece of paper. It means that I can see what is required for that night, for that scene. I actually understand that really well. I remember Cliff always saying, you know, I love coming out onto set, moving from the trailer, deluxe trailer, out onto the set and seeing 70, 90, 120 people in the crew all sweating. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're a special actor. You can do that because you've had so much experience. Yeah. I've had experience now. This is my 5th feature. I've made maybe over 50 docos, you know. I can, but my happy place is a blank piece of paper. What is here? How do we bring it together? How do we bring it together with these people? We had an amazing crew. I can ask myself the question and rely on the question more than the answer. And because we've got the right people in the clock, there's no time on my shoots. You know, we very rarely ever got to a 3rd take, which requires a lot of clarity. So the more clear I am with everything, the better. At the same time, you still got to be open to discovery. At the same time, and this was the important part, all the funders wanted to know, what does this story look like? Well, there are no comps here. I can't say there's another film out there which actually has living descendants, artistic, dramatic depiction of that descendant, maybe a 60-40 ratio between dramatization and doco. That doesn't exist. Yeah. I just looked at Whaidona and Anuru and thought, I think this is the best way to tell the story. You need to be in it. Little Haane needs to be in it. It's important to get these 4 depictions of Haane into this film. Haane, living memory through whakapapa. Haane, an incredible portrayal by Alex Tarrant. Haane through the eyes of aunties. And Big Papa Haane himself. Clear the stage and let the man arrive as well. So that really, really helped inform the form of the story.
Yeah. I talked to Donna and I said to her, why did you trust Tearepa? And how did you let go? Because it's hard, you know, when you have that story as a part of your upbringing, she talks about how he was her swimming coach.
Yes.
I don't know. She described the swimming coach as basically get off the boat and swim to Makoia. That's how she described it. But anyway, you know, she knew them.
Old school, bro.
Old school. Yeah. You know, how do you let go of that and allow someone like you to come in and do the part that they need to do? And she goes, not my expertise. The bro's the tohunga. My part is, this is the story. His part is, he's the tohunga. Make it work. That requires a lot of trust, confidence. I know that you would have known Donna, and there might have been a relationship, obviously, you know. Ngā tumanako mini say, the Ngāti Rangi, we were here of the 2020s. But anyway.
Oh, now we get into it, bro.
No, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's about the you thing and that trust and confidence and relationship building thing that makes the work that you do so superlative. You hate this, I know, but this is the part that's why it works.
Yeah. One of the great moves that they could have made was, in anyone else's hands, this could have been actors on set. Hey. And she said to me, we need to get Whaidona and Anuru out onto set. And I said, that's a great idea. Surely not every day, though. And then she said, they need to be there every day. And I went, let's do it. And we all turn up to set. So, you know, some of our days start at 11 p.m. at night. Some of them start in the afternoon and the morning. And we all turn up, and every day on set, for all of our cast and crew, the karakia starts with Anuru, then he takes us through the Haane haka. Everybody. And then
kōrero,
Goia. Tangata.
Wei kore. Titoko o te rangi, whakawhiti o te rā.
Kaharuru te whenua. Hui, takaru nai. That's the one. But because our actors arrive, they're not trying to please a director. They turn to the right, and there's Whaidona. There's Anuru. They feel so safe. This is an important thing for our Māori actors, is that because we've not meddled, but because we haven't been in charge of the way that we tell our own stories, we've always worked under the tuanui of somebody else, different institution, different Pākehā company, all of these things. You know, our Māoritanga doesn't get to dictate how we bring the story to life. And this one, it absolutely did. Like all of our mahi. But in this one, our actors arrive on set, they see her, they see him, they're ready to go to work.
Tēnā koe. Yeah.
And same for our crew. They see her, they see him, then they see me.
Well, see, they know, eh? They know. Like the rest of us, we know.
Yeah.
You know, what's it like when you release these films, particularly in the community? Well, you've got one coming up with Sergeant Haane. You know, Ngāti Whakaue, Tearepa,
B Company.
B Company. They're all bringing their whakahuas too. I heard they're all bringing. Donna said they've been asked when you come, bring your whakahua of your tupuna, of your kōrero, to the launch, to the premiere. What is it like when you're sitting there, and do you allow yourself to take it in, or are you still on edge, or is it a case of I've done my mahi now, ko tukuna e koe?
Will I be eating dumplings around the corner instead of sitting in the cinema? Possibly.
Really? Really?
No. This comes back to who you serve as the kaupapa. How do you serve the kaupapa? As long as I've told a story for Whae Donna and Anaru, and I know I have, I know we have.
Yeah.
So I feel strong about that. How does that resonate? Does that cripple me with anxiety? There always is an amount of nervousness, but at the same time, I know I've done the best that I could. So I can accept that. In terms of serving truth, that is a very interesting story, because Muru taught me that, and this comes back to Anatomy of a Downgrade, we can do the scientific breakdown and tell that story, but actually there's a bigger truth to serve here. And the bigger truth to serve with Sergeant Haane, and therefore all of our stories as it pertains to the Māori Battalion, is that all we're left with are letters and military reports and publications. And from that do we try and disseminate their contribution to that important part in terms of the world powers of the time. That narrative. Sergeant Haane has taught me there is actually something much bigger and much stronger to be learned in the telling of this story. And it is the importance of the memory of the marae, and how that actually can create new clarity, bring new evidence, create new narrative strands in terms of how we see them, how we understand them.
So you are consciously thinking of advocacy for rights and interests and responsibilities as you're undertaking the process? Or is that, are you thinking...
No, we're talking about the release, the premiere. Okay. I know that this, in terms of serving truth as well.
Yeah.
In terms of this story, or with Muru, no one else had told that story. Do we have other Māori battalion stories to tell now? Do I have reference of a body, a corpus of Māori battalion-centered stories, focused stories to draw on? All we have is our marae and our publications. And if you're lucky enough, you get to spend time with mōrehu, with soldiers. If you're lucky enough, if you put yourself in that place, as I know you have, that's where the gold is. And because I'm, a stakeholder in the future of our country, I want my 4 kids to know that there's more to the story than is on the shelf currently. And that's a really important part to the telling of the story, the extra strands of the story, of our stories.
Beautiful. It reminds me of a kōrero, you probably heard of it, Dr. Monty Suter's at Casino.
Yes.
And B Company's there, Tinny Glover, Arthur Midwood, Bomb, of course, and a couple of others. And they're at the train station. And I think the mayor asked them what happened, and they deferred to Monty, and they said, he'll tell you. And Monty was a bit awestruck and a bit humbled by being presented this opportunity to talk in front of these veterans. And he said, well, obviously I wasn't there, but this is what the account of these veterans living and those who have passed on have said happened on that time. And he talked about it for about 15, 20 minutes, and they were standing there like this. And then he finished, and the locals all clapped, and the mayor said, thank you very much, and again acknowledged the soldiers and the veterans. And then he walks away, and Monty turned to the vets and said, did I get that right? And they said, boy, we don't know, it was dark. And we were just fighting for our lives. We think you got it right, but it's about the ability to be able to continue to tell these stories.
Yes. Shine light,
Shine light.
bring dimension.
Bring dimension. Yeah, beautiful.
And with these stories, Monty, I can just see that. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
That's what, in a way, a lot of us are asking ourselves through it. Did we get it right? In this sense, a lot of the inner secret truths that haven't made the publication, they exist within whānau.
Beautiful.
So do you get it right? Well, you get it right when you open up the whare and the whānau come inside, and then they can share their story. So that's good.
The other part I wanted to pick up with you on was there's a lot of risk-taking. Maybe you don't see it that way because you see it as opportunity to be able to, as you say, keep shining light, telling these stories for our tamariki, for our mokupu and all that kind of thing. But there's an incredible amount of risk that you take in doing this mahi. Is that always going to be there, do you think? Does that always have to exist?
When whānau appoint you to tell their story,
Yeah.
you have to have prepared yourself to go out beyond the reef. And it's important. You can attain a level of match fitness by paddling around inside the reef. But unless you're prepared to go to the deepest part of the sea, you're only ever going to find what everyone else can already see from the shore. And so it's necessary. But that comes back to the courage, the actual courage that you need to give yourself in telling the story. Not emulating, allowing yourself to be influenced, but influenced in a way that allows you to find the true form of the story that it's being required of you. I don't actually see it as courage or strength or any of these things. I just know that I don't want to stand on shore and tell stories. I'm always ready to go out into the deepest part of the ocean. I said it at the start, we remain an undiscovered country to ourselves.
Yeah.
There's not enough storytellers. There's not enough places for us to be able to bring to full scope and artistic detail the stories that, in a way that is deserving of our stories. Our stories deserve the best. So they deserve the best artistry. They deserve the strongest crews. They deserve all of our clarity and all of our commitment.
But for us, like there's you, there's not many others that can do it in the way that you do it.
It probably is time to start teaching and start sharing more of Merita and Papa Don's and, their teachings with our new generation of storytellers. I would love that.
Is that on the cards?
It should be. There's a couple of other stories that I would love to tell.
Pray tell.
But, my tamariki, they've got a lot of skills, your tamariki, and the generation above them, they're so well-versed, they're so fast. They're so clever. But bringing depth and dimension into story is another aspect, I think. And so, we need to be in wānanga mode.
The saying, apples don't fall far from trees, gets mentioned a lot when it comes to te ao Māori. Any of the tamariki partial to following footsteps here, or are they being given a choice?
What we do is very, very difficult. There's a lot of responsibilities associated with it, and it means that you have to live your life in a certain way, right? And do they have the strength for that? Yeah, absolutely they do. Is it what lives in their heart? Well, I think there's easier roads for them to travel in the same sense that, they've been exposed to it. So who knows?
So if a Hollywood studio said, Tearepa, we've seen Sergeant Haane, and we want you to tell a story for us, and here's $100 million, and so you can get, 100 Cliff Curtis Deluxe trailers, yeah. And make any movie you want to make this movie for us, or indeed make any movie you want, would you do it?
There are other people that can tell those stories that way. I don't think I could. I don't think I want to tell Māori stories from a Māori perspective for Māori audiences. Does that mean I can't have fun and try a couple of other tricks? Am I ready for that? Yes, but this is what happens when you actually generate your own stories as well, is that's what gets you up in the morning, eh? And I've read a couple of Hollywood scripts and I had a lot of notes. So
I bet you did.
Yeah.
No, I bet you did, and trust me, look, I don't want to demean Hollywood, but there are
we
things
are set up in a way that says this is the apex.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that is true. That is the apex. But actually, my apex is receiving a personal invitation from Whaidona to come down to O Hinemutu Marae.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
For Reikura and myself, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah. I hear you.
Undiscovered countries, eh?
Yeah.
We remain undiscovered and unknown to ourselves.
Yeah.
This is a problem, and it all starts with stories.
Yeah.
And it all starts with people who've got the courage to pick up their mantle and walk forward and bring communities and hapu together to tell these stories. Because I want to watch them.
E mihi anei hoa, tēnā koe, tēnā kōrero kotoha.
Kia ora.
Ia kōrero mahi, ka wako o mahi ana he nahi, ia kōrero mahi. E mihi ana kia kōrero ki te whānau. E mihi ana, i te mea, oku kitenga i ngā mahi, e kite ana hau i au anō, i kite ana hau i a tātou anō, i kite ana i a tātou tamariki, i kite ana i o tātou mātua, i o tātou tupuna. Nō reira, e harai te me mea nau kia kaha, engari, te tumanako rā ia kā roa tō whai i tēnei huarahi, me takahi ana e kōrero kotoha i tēnei wā, e harai te mea, mo tāua, mo tō tāua rea ngā nahe te pai ngātu, engari, mō tātou tamariki mō kupuna. Nō reira, te arapa tēnei ka mihi atu kia koe.
Tēnā koe, Julian.
Te ora mai rā.
Rami.
Ko te reo, te take.
Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui, i tautoko.